Hi guys, what's going on, and welcome back to another video on Conqueror's Blade. So, we are over on the PTR server, and we're going to be checking out a couple of the new units, testing them out, comparing them to some of the current units in the game, and seeing basically how they perform, like we do at the start of most of these seasons. So, we've currently got two units to test, the Tier 3 and the Tier 4, which is the camels. The Tier 5 currently isn't in the testing server, so we can't test that one out at the moment, but we can see the first two units that we're going to be getting. So I suppose it makes sense to kick things off with the Tier 3, the Yang Yus, or something like that. So we're going to go pronunciation-wise. Now, just for clarity, in the testing, I'm not using any doctrines on any of the units. Did all this testing with King Alpha like we normally do, and he didn't have any doctrines on any of his units either. The reason for that is because we've had the new doctrine system, there's a whole boatload of new doctrines, and it's going to make it so complicated, and I felt it was easier and more balanced just to have no doctrines at all. But that out of the way, what is this new unit like? Well, it is just a unit with a boatload of knives. They are very interesting, and I think they're actually going to be pretty good. So they're a 24 stack unit, not particularly tanky, and basically no defensive stats, 8,000 hit points. They die pretty easily, but they come with a load of these knives. You actually get to kind of see them stacked up on them. And you can see from the ammo count, they actually have quite a chunk of ammo. And they're actually quite damaging, these knives. So they have basically a standard basic attack, where they can run and throw the knives. And it's pointing out that these knives throw whilst running, and they throw effectively as well. The AI aim is actually pretty good. But then they get two knife throwing abilities. Basically, a focus fire. This is like a musket's focus fire, and they throw in a certain direction. You can basically just aim where they throw them. And then they also have basically an auto throw. You press it, they throw it, but they also get a movement speed and a damage dealt increase for a short period of time after that as well. And these are on extremely short cooldowns. Particularly this one, it's like 3 or 4 seconds is the cooldown or something, which makes it really very effective. And because they have this quite large amount of ammo, it means they throw these knives super quickly, and have quite a lot of them. I end up running them down the bottom veterancy line, which gives the throwing knives a bleed effect, which is quite nice. On the top line, it basically gives them this stackable slow, which I guess is kind of nice, good for hunting down heroes, but for me, I think in most situations, particularly if you're going to be coming up against higher tier units, this seemed like a bit of a better option, but I guess more testing will show that out. But anyway, let's hop into some battles with them. Let's give them a little bit of a test and see how they're stacking up. I initially wanted to test them against a group of other tier 3 units. First got stuck in with some condos, and well, the condos gave them a pretty good run for the money, but they took a chunk of damage on the way in, and they just couldn't quite win the fight. So the new tier 3 just managed to overwhelm them, and just managed to win the fight on that one. But I wanted to try out a few different tier 3 units. So we tried Sons of Fenrir. Obviously, they get the range damage reduction buff on the way in, so they don't take much damage from the knives, and their burst damage is just enough to overwhelm and win that fight. Against the new Dimachari easily bursts them down, super high damage, and it is too much. Tried against the monks, thought they might be able to deflect some of the knives, and they do actually block quite a good chunk of them, but not quite enough. And actually then once they get into melee combat, the unit is just about able to overwhelm them. You know, I'm continually using that one ability when they're in combat, so they can keep throwing their knives when they're in. And even though they win, they do pretty much lose the bulk of the unit. Finally, I thought it might be good to test them against Berserkers. I thought they might end up kind of doing okay, because they're throwing knives at a relatively sort of small clump of unit, and they do get a chunk of damage in on the knife throw, but the Berserkers just have got too much health and are far too tanky and absolutely flatten them for 0 losses. So how does the unit feel? Honestly, pretty good. I like it. I think it's going to be quite a popular unit when the game releases. It seems, at least on the PTR, and bear in mind this is always subject to change, it seems relatively balanced. They seem about comparable to most other tier 3 units. I think they are going to be quite annoying. They do seem to kill heroes also quite effectively, so I think they're going to be kind of an annoying unit, particularly in the opening of the season when there's 10 of them and they're all throwing millions of knives at you. But other than that, I think it's going to be a relatively decent but balanced unit. So that leads us on to the second unit, the camels. Everyone's favourite, or at least my favourite unit. These guys really do look very cool. I am a big fan of these as a unit model. Probably the best looking unit I think we've had in the game for quite a while. They are pretty epic, and I love the sort of cataphract style, like lamella plate armor they've got over the front of the camel. They've got some armored camel lancers. Love it. Anyway, so how do these guys play? Quite an interesting unit, really. Some slightly strange mechanics to them. I think this is one of those units that has got a few bugs in PTR that we'll see sort of smoothed out a little bit as we head into actual main release. So they sort of work as a mobile pike unit. They get this thing called Barricade, which is effectively a brace ability. The camels lie down and they basically brace their lances onto the floor. Quite an effective brace against cavalry. Stops everything, including hussars. It seems to put them in this state of perma-stun. Now, I think that is this anti-cavalry. I think that is essentially what it means. I couldn't work out what it meant when they said the unique smell of camels is repellent to horses, and it frightens them. It just is a bit of a strange... How does that present itself in the game? But when you charge cavalry into the front of these, they basically get stuck in like a perma-stun. And I think that is probably this, is what's causing that. And it even stops hussars, so it basically stops everything clean in its tracks. They annoyingly don't rotate when they're in this brace formation, which is something I'm kind of disappointed at, considering they've just introduced rotation to fortebraccios, so that they act a bit more like they've got some amount of common sense rather than just standing there being stabbed. Why couldn't they add some amount of rotation, even if the guy could just turn a little bit to his left and right to the camels? I think would have made a lot more sense, but anyway, they haven't. And their other ability is deceptively called Charge. Now, it's really not a charge at all. They sort of brace their lancers and then sort of wander around in a circle, is the best way of describing it. They seem to... the AI goes very weird on this. They seem to be very tanky when they're in this mode, and to some extent, yes, it is effective against cavalry, but it's not as effective as, just bracing an incoming charge. It seems to have some effectiveness sometimes against infantry, and it can be kind of damaging, but they just, some of them just seem to wander in a circle without even making any attempt at getting towards the enemy. It's kind of a bit weird. You'll see in some of the footage we've got up kind of how that's playing out, but yeah, certainly a little bit odd. A couple of veterancy line options to go down. There's increased damage versus infantry. To be honest, I think probably I wouldn't bother with this, having played with them a fair bit now, that their charge against infantry just isn't all that effective. Then they get basically decreased damage, so more resistances, and then they get this send flying, which is probably the better of the abilities, because it knocks down soldiers as it sort of collides with them in the model, which is kind of cool, kind of effective. In terms of stat-wise, there's only 12 people in the unit, but they are extremely tanky at 8,400 hit points, which makes them pretty survivable, because they also have pretty good base defensive stats. And this is without any doctrines on, so this can certainly be getting a little bit higher as well. They do have decent base damage statistics, but again, they go a little bit funny in this sort of charge ability, so it doesn't necessarily apply them quite as you would think. But certainly makes for quite an interesting unit. The most interesting thing about them is, of course, their brace. It really is very effective against cavalry. Unit of cataphracts, it basically catches and permastuns so many of them, and, well, kills sort of a good chunk of them just in the opening bit. King then brings them around and rear charges, which, okay, it does do a bit of damage, but then as the unit charges through, they just get caught in the perma-stun again, and it basically wipes the whole unit of cataphracts. So coming from behind is not a guarantee of success. Unit of hussars, on the bottom veterancy line, with the stun immunity, just immediately get caught and stunned. It doesn't matter. Basically, the stun from these camels overrides any existing stun protection, so hussars cannot charge through them as a unit, and that is kind of interesting to see, I think. We then went on to try about using Laos if you sort of came round the side, so you didn't charge from the front, and it was more effective. But the problem is, the unit goes in, does their bludgeon strikes, does their devastation, gets into the unit, but then they're in the unit, so then they get caught on the perma-stun again. And you can see the Laos getting caught up in here. And they do start to push through and do some damage, but a lot of them are now just caught on the perma-stun. And then as their health drips down, you see the Laos start to get caught up, and eventually they end up dying. And in the end, the camels actually did just win this one. If you can get behind them with infantry though, jumping over them in this case with Sons of Fenrir, then you can wipe them out almost instantly, because the camels do not turn, so they make no attempt to defend themselves. You can see like this, the Sons of Fenrir can just push through, taking no losses, we're doing no damage to them at all, and they can just completely wipe the camels. So you are going to have to be pretty sort of Johnny on the spot with keeping an eye on your camels to make sure they don't get flanked. The other thing to mention, fire archers, they are extremely vulnerable to fire. Look how quickly these camels died to just a few fire archers. And that's the whole unit dead. Fire archers kill these guys super quickly. They can nominally be used against infantry. You can see them in a fight against some paladins here. We also tried them against palace guards. This is with the knockdown on. You can see them sending the unit flying. They just don't really do much damage. It's just very weird AI in terms of how their movement. And this is them in the 2 mode, in the charge mode. You can see with their braced lancers sort of running around. It's all just a little bit weird. In a large group, maybe of lower tier units, might they do a chunk of damage? Yeah, it's possible. But it's certainly a slightly kind of weird way in which they work. And it doesn't seem super effective against infantry. So in all, how do the camels fare? Well, they're an interesting unit. They are more, to me, like a mobile pike unit. I think we're probably going to see some of the AI changes because they seem to behave kind of very strangely. I'll leave you with some of the kind of AI mess-ups that we've had while doing this. This is actually while trying to attack King, and the unit just couldn't seem to actually hit him. They got stuck going around in a circle around him. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, a few changes still to be made there. They could be a decent unit. I think for now, I don't see why you would take them over, say, a unit of Fortebraccios, because they don't seem to have that much against infantry, and both are very effective against cavalry. It's kind of interesting to see more cavalry counters coming into the game, though, and I do absolutely love the look of the camels, so I'm certainly looking forward to getting into game and testing them. Anyway, do let me know your thoughts. What do you think about these 2 units? Do let me know in the comments down below, and of course, subscribe to the channel for lots more Conqueror's Blade content. I shall leave you with a little bit of camel mess-ups. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you all on the next one.